So today, we're kicking off with something different. We can look at the other side of the spectrum of futures, so the client side, should we put it like that, nicely. And we have with us Esra Aydin. Now, Esra is all about complex societies, and I think she actually wants to stay on and do a little bit of work with you lot, because you definitely fit in that. But she's been working for years now in the corporate side, and previously was working on the sort of, I suppose you'd put it, sort of the connecting sort of aspects of art, design and architecture, and within that sort of framework. And then in 2016, she moved to Volkswagen, where she now sits at as the future's head and leader of the company's, I think it's called the Transformation Network for Development and Sustainability. She's part of the core team, leads the core team, in fact. And she's also the spokesperson for corporate engagement and sustainability. And I think they're pushing very, very, very hard at the moment to work with a lot of these major challenges and issues like climate change, like CSR, I think particularly, and they're doing well. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to Esra Aydin.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you for having me. I must confess I feel a little bit like an exotic bird, because you all are futurists, and I come from this corporate world where we also talk a lot about the future, but I think we sometimes mean something else, but sometimes also not. And I think what I will try to do today is to tell you a little bit about our future work within the Future Heads network. I'm not the head of futures, I'm a future head. that's I think, yeah, very important. What else? My name is Esra, as you heard before from Derek, and I am based in Berlin. I'm a social scientist. I'm 39 years old. My daughter is 2, and I am a spokesperson for corporate engagement and sustainability at Volkswagen Group. So most of you will know my company, and the reason why I'm presenting you some facts and figures is because I think to understand the size of the company, you know, I have more than 630,000 colleagues worldwide. We're working in 18 different brands and business units. You can find our products, our Volkswagen Golfs or Beetles, or the Porsche 911s, or the Audis and Skoda Octavias, probably in every corner of the world. And then there are, of course, some newer business units like Carriot, our software company, or Moya, or our mobility service. So this is very important to me because I will talk a lot about change and transformation today, and I think it's very helpful to understand about what kind of tank ship we're talking here. So in my role as a spokesperson for corporate engagement and sustainability, I deal with a diverse range of social, political, and environmental topics every day. And yeah, you see the buzzwords here, but as you can see, it's not only about today, but it is also very much about tomorrow. And I think the biggest challenge that we are all facing, or humankind is facing, is climate change, and yeah, and all challenges related to that. The automotive industry is facing its biggest transformation to date. What we at Volkswagen Group believe is that individual mobility is here to stay, but what we know is it will fundamentally change. And as I said, driven by climate change, but also by new technologies and by changing customer needs. Not only the engine that we know today, the combustion engine, will be replaced by an electric battery, but also the car itself will be more like a digital device, an experience rather than a product. So how do we do this? We say we're ready for 2030, and 2030 is in like a little bit more than 8 years. It's really around the corner. And we say the future of mobility will be emission-free, fully connected, and autonomous. Yes, already autonomous in 2030. And Volkswagen is a significant driver of this transformation and accelerates its realignment from a vehicle manufacturer to a leading global software-driven mobility provider. I think I'm not telling you any news here. I think this is like already very much, everywhere. And what is our guiding principle? Our guiding principle is the development of sustainable, connected, safe and tailored mobility solutions for future generations. And also, coming back to climate change, our goal is being fully carbon neutral by 2050 in alignment with the Paris Climate Agreement worldwide. But how does this transformation happen? So Volkswagen Group, and this is also no news to you, has come a long way since the diesel crisis that forced us to transform not only our business, but mainly our company culture. Some even believe that the diesel crisis accelerated the transformation. It was the wake-up call that set the big tank ship into motion. The external push was the one force to get the ball rolling, but I truly believe that transformation and therefore a fertile soil for innovation requires a corporate culture that reflects according universal values, openness, transparency, team spirit. Transformation and innovation can only be achieved by overcoming old structures and hierarchies, benefiting those who have already been in power for a long time. Let's remember my first slide. The Volkswagen Group tank ship is huge, 630,000 colleagues worldwide. How do you create real change? Changing company culture requires a movement, not a mandate. This title or quote is not new, but it is still very valid to me. This is a title of a Harvard Business Review article about or on change processes in corporations. And it reminds me very much of what I will be presenting to you shortly, of the future heads, because we are a movement within the company. And yes, Volkswagen had to change, and technologies and legal frameworks definitely help, but how to change culture? Our answer is the future heads, and our intention is change. For me and 300 colleagues worldwide, this movement has been the so-called Future Heads Network. And this is us. I'm sorry for the, photo, it could have been better. And this is only a few of us, because we are 300 colleagues worldwide in total, and this is a smaller group which met on a summit in Wolfsburg 2 years ago. 3 years ago. No, 2 years ago. Yeah, 2019, I'm sorry. One gets confused with the pandemic. So who are we? We are future thinkers, doers, and guards, for sure. The Volkswagen Group Future Heads Network is a prototype for a virtual organization with a cross-divisional governance. Self-initiated projects are the driving force. In other words, colleagues with all kinds of professional backgrounds and career positions come together to work on impending questions about our future that are identified in and by members of the network itself. Volkswagen, as a traditional car manufacturer, in the midst of a transformation process driven by technological developments, climate change, and social challenges, in an ever more connected world, all kinds of stakeholders and considerations impact this transformation process. So together, the future heads are identifying new unconsidered needs and blind spots, or we explore how cultural understanding might influence engineering. And again, we are all intrinsically motivated. This is extra work. It's not part of our job description, so we do not have a mandate. But we want to change something. Because I can be honest to you here, it's not always easy to work for a tank ship, right? Everything takes so long. And so within this group, we can be a little bit faster than we usually are. And we understood at a certain point to be frustrated about the pace of things is not the solution. If we want to have change, we have to be the change that we want to see ourselves. So I'm among futurists here. I think I would totally fail if I would try to explain to you the methods that we are using. But one method, how we think about future, is probably very familiar to you. It's the scenario making or creation. So it all started with the Futures of Mobility initiative. And you can see some of the initiatives here on this slide. I only picked some that I thought that might, be appealing to you. And I will not go into details with every project because it would take too much time. But how did we proceed? So the Futures of Mobility initiative started with identifying 4 emblematic cities or regions. We identified San Francisco, Mumbai, Beijing, and Eastern Saxony. We developed living environments and, scenarios to identify the characteristics, structures, developments, and therefore future mobility needs of each. These scenarios were used to challenge every single future brand portfolio. So what you also have to understand in this big corporation with all its powerful big brands, Volkswagen, Porsche, Audi, the working together or the culture of sharing knowledge is also pretty new. So what we did is, and how does it look like to challenge the portfolios of future portfolios of every brand, is that I, as a social scientist, found myself discussing vehicles and or mobility solutions together with designers, engineers, software developers, etc. So we traveled from one brand to the next and did workshops, from Audi to Skoda to Porsche to Volkswagen. We've been everywhere. And I can maybe give you one example how the challenging, looks like. So for example, at one brand, a colleague of mine presented a mobility solution or a car for very elderly, very fragile people. And we're talking about products that will come, that will enter the market in 20, 25 years. And I said to him, yeah, but what's your business case? Because, with all the developments also in healthcare and medicine, will there be so many fragile and elderly people left, with all the developments? And if I look at my dad, who's 72, he's more fit than I am. So who are we really talking about? And also, do elderly people really want a dedicated product for themselves? That's also the question. Who wants to be in a product or in a vehicle that says only for the olds? So this is one example of how it works. He's of course an engineer. His thinking is very much dominated by what is possible, developing a product or using a technology, and he does not automatically consider the other developments that are happening at the same time in the world. And this interdisciplinary approach is important because I, of course, look at the world less from a technological but more from a stakeholder perspective. And I would repeat this very often today, probably. I truly believe in the power and success of diverse teams. But we do not only discuss cars. So another example is the futures of ethics. Again, a very similar starting point. The question is, how will the future look like? How can we develop scenarios regarding ethics and integrity? We think collectively about social, ecological, economic, technological, and political developments and describe possible scenarios. Again, in our diverse working team, we had the chance to consider different perspectives. For example, we looked at the consequences of global warming or the use of artificial intelligence or shifts in political power. And by taking a 360-degree view, we wanted to help to identify problems and provide ethically based answers for Volkswagen Group. And another example I will talk about and show you is the post-urban scenarios node. But first, I will show you a little movie. So what you see here pretty much sums up my summer vacation. First, I was in southeastern Turkey at the Mediterranean Sea, where my parents come from. And on the right, you see, of course, easy to identify a street scene in New York City where my other half of the family comes from and lives. I think you got the point. So, what is this? The phone that you see is a taxi stand in Arsus. That's a very small village in southeast Turkey. And my parents have a house up in the hills, so the only way to get there is by car. And there is a taxi stand. This is a taxi stand. But I waited there 1 hour, and the phone was ringing all the time, but nobody picked up. So I could not go to my parents' place and, change for dinner because there was simply no possibility to get away. And walking is too far, and it's really hot. It's like 37 degrees, so you don't want to walk. And so this is what I would say is a blind spot. We, together with my colleague Daniela Blaschke from the Public Affairs Department, I started a conversation about post-urban scenarios because we think that we need to pay more attention to non-urban areas and develop new mobility solutions in that context. Again, New York City, you can find cabs at every corner, you can take the sub, you can call an Uber, you have endless opportunities. And but what about the countryside, and what about the rural areas and mobility there? So yes, there are more business cases in cities because more people live in cities, the GDP is higher. But why do people live in cities or move there in the first place? Most of them for work. But what if work changes? Or what if, for example, a pandemic hits and COVID-19 showed us how many of us could work remotely suddenly? I have been in the office maximum 10 times in the last 2 years. At Volkswagen, our company claim is mobility for all. And yes, mobility is more than moving data, people, or goods from A to B. Mobility is a right, a social condition, and a prerequisite for access and change. future mobility is almost exclusively designed for city dwellers. So one of the reasons why people in non-urban areas vote for populist parties is because they feel disconnected. So social cohesion is at stake. And we created the discussion about post-urban scenarios. And I will explain this expression a little bit because, we did not call it rural mobility. We called it post-urban scenarios because post-urban is meant as an expression for time, but also for space, and more so a relation between cities and the space surrounding them. Can we think the one without the other? What could a holistic concept look like? How can new technologies and digitization overcome old boundaries, and what can mobility be in that context? I think it would take too much time if I would go into every detail, but one example, for example, that we came up with, and that was also very much triggered by the future scenario for Eastern Saxony, was what if, we think about bringing a marketplace or a city infrastructure into, more remote areas. When we think about the future, we think about autonomous driving cars, and what if, like, this little pods that we created could be a doctor's praxis, a bank office, or, a little shop, and bring the city infrastructure like a marketplace into a village. So we pitched this idea to our colleagues worldwide, and soon colleagues from all parts of the world joined the discussion and presented their research and their future concepts for rural mobility. So in San Francisco, our colleagues are thinking about the culture of independent mobility in ex-urban US states. This is very important for Americans, to independent mobility. And our colleagues in China are thinking about Taobao villages and potentials for mobility and tourism in rural China. Our colleagues in Dresden and Mladá Boleslav are thinking about connecting villages in East Germany and Czech Republic. And last but not least, our colleagues from Volkswagen South Africa and Rwanda reached out to us and presented us their ideas, how through digitization, renewable energy, and sharing economy, big steps could be done. And by the way, Volkswagen South Africa and Volkswagen Rwanda have been the first within Volkswagen Group to also present a shared mobility app. Because, of course, most people cannot afford Volkswagen cars. And this is what I want to talk more about. So, this is like a forecast, a projection by UN Habitat about how the African continent could look like. So we see a trend to mass urbanization by 2063. But maybe there is an alternative. Maybe if we change the circumstances in the countryside, maybe we can also talk about villagization in 2033 on the African continent. So this is what my colleagues then presented to us, an electric tractor for the African countryside. We all know mechanization of agriculture is absolutely necessary to enable farmers to a more sustainable and conservator agriculture. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert, but this is, I think, the right expression. And it can be climate friendly too. So what did they come up with? They created a sustainable CO2-free hub where farmers can book a solar energy fueled electric tractor, including a trained driver, by app. So, and also the batteries are replaceable, and they allow that the tractor can operate 8 hours per day. But with creating this hub, they also created a nucleus for working power and electricity, and thus, many more business opportunities in rural emerging regions. We loved this idea, and we pitched it to another future head, an external future head, because eventually we teamed up with renowned architect and urban thinker Rem Koolhaas and his colleague Samir Bantal, who have been researching the countryside for the last 7 years. We not only became their research partner, but even contributed to their countryside exhibition at the Guggenheim Museum with a study of the shared electric solar-fueled tractor for the African continent. And why is this so important? Let's remember, the idea came from our innovation team, but only together with me, who works in communication and has been working with cultural partners for many years, and with my colleague Daniela, who was based in the Public Affairs Department, with other future heads, it was possible to create a stage for this idea. So without the Future Heads network, the electric tractor would have never had access to this kind of audience and never would get that kind of visibility. And I'm very proud of this project, maybe you can tell. And I'm very happy that together we could also work on, making it also a little bit, possible. Because now, what's happening now is that there is a prototype of the electric tractor now, and it is being tested in Rwanda right now. And we could even gain more partners on the project. So Volkswagen Group Innovation, Volkswagen Rwanda, the GIZ, and the University of Rwanda and the Rwanda Institute for Conservation Agriculture are working together to, to get this farm into testing, and they with real farmers, and they're collecting now experiences and data to develop it further. And this CSR project is ticking many boxes. It's, of course, about sustainable farming, it's about renewable energy, it's about electric mobility, it's about digitalization and new business models for the countryside. So I think what we wanted to show with this first idea and scenario of post-urban futures is that there are alternatives, and it is possible to think about the future in a different way. And what I also believe in, and I think this is also a little bit the theme here, is that the future is colorful. And thank you very much.